Welcome, AP Stat students. This will be our last installment for this year, 2020. It is June 16th. So just offering one more learning opportunity, and I'm hoping this will be helpful to you as you enter into the real world. Some of you are almost 18 or are 18. In the other assignment, credit score number 1, I showed you the different categories that contribute to a credit score. We showed you what the different credit scores might lead to. What I wanted to do now was sort of help you develop or where to start with your credit and some myth buster type of ideas that are out there that I hear a lot that I wanted to talk about. So first step at 18, you can start your credit activity at 18. The first and very best, safest way to start credit is what's called a secure credit card. You can get those through a bank, and especially if you've already had a relationship with this bank, say you've had a savings account or a checking account with this bank, they will probably work with you on a secure credit card. Basically what happens is, let's say the particular bank asks you for a security deposit. It'll be anywhere from $300 to $500 depending. And basically what that does is that serves as a kind of backup for the bank in case you were not to pay back your credit card. They would have that money, and they would be able to use that money to pay back your balance. Now, it is not a fee. A lot of people think that it's a fee that you have to give up to just have the credit card. That's not true. If you use it responsibly, if you pay back your loans on the credit card, basically it's a loan. If you do everything you're supposed to do, you get that security deposit back. So make sure you understand that that's the idea. Security deposit is just a safety for the person loaning you the money, but it is yours under the condition that you do everything you're supposed to do. Okay. The second step is possibly with that same bank or even a different bank that you've been with is some banks will allow you to put a line of credit on one of your accounts. Now, my experience has been this is with a savings account typically. And what you could have is it probably could go with a checking as well. Basically, what would happen is this is kind of your, you've probably heard of overdraft protection, things like that. So if you go beyond what's in the account, this can kick in and sort of be a line of credit. The one that I had when I first started out was $1,000. So it was a line of credit. So definitely did count in case I charged something that was over what I had in the account. Okay. It is still a loan. So if you do go and draft beyond what you have in your savings account, again, that line of credit would kick in and you'd have to pay that back. So after that, if let's say you've graduated sort of from those two, your secure credit card, after a couple of years, they might offer to upgrade it to a line of credit with the bank, or they might even have some other something else you can get into with that particular bank. So step 3 is possibly a pretty reliable credit card company. I would not pay attention much to the ones that come in the mail. There's going to be a ton of them that come at you when you turn 18. Really make sure that you look into the companies and what the fees are, what the annual fees are, what the interest rates are on any balance that you carry. So make sure that when you do get into this, make sure that you have a trusted adult guiding you through that. Okay, a parent, a grandparent, somebody that is looking out for your best interest and really knows what they're doing. So a lot of people claim to know what they're doing, but not everybody does. So be very careful, do your research, do your homework. Credit cards would be the third step. Possibly even, you could possibly even get into a car loan. The goal behind this whole thing, why I'm teaching students, is I want to see more people be credit what would you call it, literate, credit literacy. So there's so little of that out there that we send people out of high school and there's really no experience for them. And too many people, too many adults don't really know how to use credit properly or responsibly. So we got to start to make sure that we teach this idea and more people go out into the real world literate in the ideas of credit. So last session, we talked a lot about interest, which is the penalty of borrowing money or the cost of borrowing money. So those are some essential ideas in being credit literate. Okay. Now, some other activities as you graduate through the different levels of credit is you have to make sure you pay at least the minimum payment, and you can always pay more. Make sure you make that payment on time. This contributes, again, go back to the other one, credit history, which is probably the biggest impact on your credit score. So each time you make an on-time payment, it starts to contribute to credit history. Every time you make a late payment, even if it's just a couple days, it's a big ding on your credit score. In fact, it's likely that it'll take 12 or more on-time payments to make up for one minor late payment. I mean, it might only be a day or two, and it would hurt your credit score. Okay. If they're more than 3 or 4 days or 5 days late, that's even more. It would take even more on-time payments to make up for those. So make the minimum payment. We'll talk about minimum payments more later in the session. Car loans, they have minimum payments. That's pretty much what you're expected to pay each month. Credit cards have minimum payments, those types of things. Okay, so understanding that any borrowing situation will impact your credit score. Now, what is a credit-bearing account? We've got credit cards, car loans, home loans, student loans. Those are credit-bearing because they're loans. Somebody's lending you the money. A credit card company is basically paying for your purchases and assuming or hoping that you're going to pay them back. So that's why credit cards are really a loan, but it's not something that you have to go to the bank each time and get approval for. The approval is in the fact that the card is active. All right. So cable bill. Some people, this is kind of a myth. Some people think that if you put your name on a cable bill and you pay that on time, that it's going to help your credit. That's not true. Okay, cable is a service that you pay for in full at the end of every month. There's no loan. We don't assume that you're going to borrow anything. You're going to pay off what you owe at the end of every month. Okay, utility bill, cable bill, things like that are not going to impact their credit positively, at least. If you don't pay it, there's a different scenario. But so understanding interest, go back to the previous post that I had. So credit score 1 talked significantly about interest. Okay, that's basically the lender's reward for lending money, the borrower's cost of purchasing the item that they don't have the money for right then. Okay. Now, the big thing on interest is on credit cards, it's very high. That is dangerous for a credit card company, and it is extremely costly if you carry a balance for a borrower or a credit card user. Now, here's the difference that maybe a lot of people don't know is when you use a credit card, there is no interest until after that first month. So when you get the bill, if you pay the entire bill, there's no interest. There's only interest if you carry a balance. That means you make the minimum payment and you leave some on the account. That means that turns into a loan that you have to then pay interest on. Now, most of the interest rates on credit cards are 20% annual percentage rate. Now, we pay the bills monthly, so basically that turns out to be a little over 1.5% each month. Okay, and 18% APR is 1.5% each month, so it might be a little higher. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's it starts to get be a big deal once you get a big balance. So let's say you leave 1,000 on a credit card account. That's not unusual. It's going to be a penalty of $15, really for nothing. So you're going to add $15 on that just for 1 month. So pretty dangerous. Just be careful. So best practice, I'll say this multiple times. If you're going to use credit cards, make sure you are ready to pay the entire bill at the end of every month. If you carry a balance on a credit card, it's very costly. So avoid it. Sometimes it'll happen, but try not to make a habit of it. Okay. All right. Credit limits. This is something that's very let's see. This is one of the topics that is misunderstood the most. People don't really understand what this is all about. So each credit account has a limit. Let's say just for easy numbers, even though there's no credit card that would do this, but let's say the amount's $100. Okay, just to make it easy. Your advised utilization rate is 30% of the limit. So if the limit is $100, the most you should charge for that given month is $30. Now, could you go up to 100? Of course. All right, there is the limit. You could go higher, but when you use more than 30% of the limit, it looks like you're over extended. So the recommended is 30%. Of course, there's more room in there. That looks like responsible uses if you stay between 1 and 30% of the limit. Okay, let's do more common numbers. Most credit cards have a limit of $10,000. So that means your credit responsible use is anything between $1 and $3,000. Okay, so that would be at least using something. I know I said 1%. You don't have to use quite 1%. You use anything on the card, and that shows that you're using credit as long as it's under the 30% limit. Now, will there be some months where you go over that 30% recommended? Yes, that will happen. But let's understand that that is an alarm a little bit for the credit calculating companies. When they see you go over the 30% threshold of utilization rate, that starts to lower your credit score, believe it or not. So be aware of it, be aware of what your limits are, and make sure you're not overutilizing in the eyes of the credit card companies or the credit calculating companies. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense. Now, myths that are out there. Okay, I've had this happen to me before where, my family, we started using our credit card, our American Express card, at the grocery store and really to pay off pretty much everything in our monthly bills. So our usage got to be pretty high, and our limit was only $10,000. What happened was we were starting to use it over that 30% utilization rate. And even though we paid that off at the end of every month fully, we didn't carry a balance, we paid it off in full, it looked like to the credit calculating companies that we were overutilizing. Now, Amex actually picked up on this and they were trying to help us out. They were going to raise our limit to 15,000 so that we would be back into a lower utilization. Think about it. If they raise your limit and you spend the same amount, your utilization rate actually goes down. It's kind of interesting. So think about that for a few minutes and see how that might happen. I try to create an example for you to consider. Okay. Now, is this a plot by the credit card company to get you to, overspend? No, just because they raise your limit doesn't mean you should spend more. That's definitely false. Okay. If you have your typical spending habits and you have them, you're thoughtful of them and you have them under control and you have a budget, well, just them raising your limit doesn't mean, oh, go spend more. No, you still using your same spending habits. Okay. If they offer to raise your limit, it's actually to help you. It's to get your utilization rate down. Okay. So for an example that I created here, if somebody typically uses 200 a month and their limit is 1,000, That's a good utilization rate. That's 20%. Now, what happens if that same borrower starts to use it more? That's exactly what we did with our Amex card. We started using it more. The borrower gets up to 300, sometimes even 400 a month. Now the utilization rate for 300 is 30%. For 400 a month, it's 40%. Now that right there starts to make it look like you're overutilizing. You're borrowing too much. Now the person's probably fine. They probably pay it off at the end of every month, but it still looks bad to the credit calculating companies. Okay, so what would happen? Let's say the same credit card says, you know what, this is a responsible user. They've been with us for years. We're going to help them out. And we're going to raise their limit to 5,000. That doesn't mean spend more. All that means is now we lowered their utilization rate for the same usage. They went from 40% to 8%, just because we raised the limit. So the credit card companies helping. However, try to understand what that's all about. It's about utilization rate. All right, look through that. Look up some more stuff on that. That's a good idea to really get better at. That is misunderstood quite a bit. Okay. Next, a parent can put their child as an authorized user on their credit card account to raise their credit score. That's true. Okay. Now, there's something that's tricky about this, though. If the only reason the parent is doing this is to defraud the system, that's illegal. Now, that doesn't mean anybody's out there putting these people in jail. What it means is don't make sure you don't have the fraudulent intent. Okay, so you're not trying to be fraudulent. You're not trying to just raise their credit score to mislead. What you are trying to do is you are trying to, as a byproduct, sort of raise their credit score. The real intent has to be, oh, well, I want my child to have this ability to purchase something in case of an emergency. Okay, so let's say, the person's out and they forgot cash and they need a tank of gas to get home. Well, that would be a good reason for the child to be able to use that card. They're an authorized user. They should be able to do that, and there's no reason why that's not fraudulent. That's okay. That's in case of emergency, so it's got good intent. As a byproduct, if that parent has good credit behavior on that account, not only will it help the parent's credit score, it will help the child's credit score as well. Okay, so that's a byproduct. It's not to defraud, the person's credit score. It is to give them something to use in case of emergency, and it just so happens to increase their credit score. Whatever. Okay, so what if the intent is to teach the child along the way how to use credit? Well, there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing fraudulent about that. You're giving them a positive credit experience. You're teaching them how to do it, and that's not fraudulent. You're not purposefully giving somebody a credit score that's misrepresentative of their abilities. So the person is gaining positive credit experience. They're learning. So their new increase in credit score will be representative of their credit behavior. Again, not fraudulent. So make sure that if you're going to get into this, it is really nice of the parents to do so. It's a little dangerous for the parents as long as they're monitoring it carefully and they trust the kid, and it's not fraudulent in nature, then it's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's allowed. So myth number 3, borrowers. Okay. You do only have to pay the minimum payment. Okay. So car loans, they calculate your monthly payment. That's essentially a minimum payment. You can always make more. The extra would go towards the balance. Now, the minimum payment is covering interest and then some of the balance to make sure that the loan is paid off. Okay. Now, what if you're on a credit card? Same thing. They're going to let you borrow the money, but the interest rates tend to be really, really high. And you've got to understand this. A lot of people get in over their heads with credit card debt. That's because they don't understand it. Credit cards are meant to be paid off in full at the end of every month. That way, there's no interest. In an emergency, you might have a month where, okay, something goes bad and you just whatever, something didn't go great. Um, in 1 month, you might have a balance, but hopefully you keep it as low as possible and you work to pay that off as quickly as possible. Okay. However, what's going to happen? All right, any balance that's left after the minimum payment. Okay. Say, you charge $1,000 and the minimum payment's probably 80, right? Let's say you pay 500 of it. You paid more than the 80, more than the minimum, but you still left some money on the account. Okay. Just couldn't cover it that month. So you got 500 in debt. Well, they're going to apply interest to that. Okay. If you borrow for 1 month, it's about probably it's probably only $1.50, and maybe a little bit more. $7.50 is my guess on a $500. Okay, so they're going to tack on $7.50 in addition to the 500. That's your kind of cost of borrowing money for the month. It's pretty high rates. So here's an example you can look through. You can pause it, read through it. Okay, so and then down to the bottom where it says, okay, got to watch this. I've seen people do this before. Um, they've maxed out credit cards. They get up to that $10,000 limit, and it's crazy. But once you get up there in that huge range of debt, the interest alone each month is an additional $150 a month. It's basically a car payment, but it's just because it's extra cost. So you're not getting anything out of that. It's just an extra cost, another $150 a month. It can get out of control fast. So please, anytime you're using credit cards, have the intent that you're going to pay it off at the end of every month. You're not going to carry a balance. Okay. Last myth that we'll go through is people should not pay off their car loan or close an old credit card account because it can lower their score. Okay. The true part is those activities do lower your credit score. Paying off a car loan, believe it or not, could lower your credit score. I shouldn't say it will. Could. Okay. Here's what it is. The average age of accounts is a factor in your credit score. Okay. So let's say you have a car loan that you've been carrying for the last 5 years, right? It's almost up. The age of that account is 60 months. Well, if your other accounts are younger than that, newer than that, if you drop that, you pay off that car that had a 60-month age of account, it's going to lower your score just a little bit. Okay, an old credit card probably will, because let's say that's 10 years old. Now, that's 120 months old. Closing that is probably going to lower your credit score because your other accounts are probably not that old. So it's minor, it's recoverable. So yes, you should pay off your car loan when you're ready. The reason for that is financially, you're going to have some liquidity now that you don't have that car loan to pay off. You could free up some money in your monthly budget. So it's a good financial move to pay off a car loan, but it might be temporarily going to be lowering your credit score. But it's temporary, it's recoverable. Credit scores are not supposed to be forever increasing. There's some things that'll increase it. There has to be some activities that lower it slightly, but you can recover that. And that's just how it goes. Okay. However, timing is everything. You don't want to do that if you don't have to, if you're also looking for a house loan. So say you apply for a home mortgage, that's going to lower your credit score because of what we call new credit. Okay. Any inquiry into your credit score is probably going to lower your credit due to new credit. You're looking for a loan. Now, if you also add in the fact that you lowered your possible average age of accounts, well, now you just went from maybe a 680 credit score down to a 640. Before you were eligible for a mortgage, now you're not, because there's too many negative credit activities in a row. So just make sure that timing is everything. Make sure that you know everything that you need to about credit. before you get into it. And hopefully this will be something in real life that you learn from high school math that actually helps you. So thanks so much for a good year, and take care.